Hey, this is Cameron. Welcome back to the Busy Gardener channel. So today what we're going to look at is how to do pruning for multi-planting and for open center pruning. Let's get busy. Mrs. Busy Gardener?
Yes.
It looks crazier, doesn't it? This video is really different. It actually is, the bulk of it was recorded as part of my other video, of my just regular winter pruning video. And what I found was, one, that video ended up being like 25 minutes long as edited. So I cut it down and I'm putting the content that has to do with open center pruning, like what we have behind me here, where it's not a big central leader going up, but it's open center, which makes it really easy to have lots of scaffolding, low heights, which is what we want for the backyard orchard. So we're going to look at a few things: how to focus on open center pruning, how to look for fruiting wood versus just vegetative growth, what types of fruit and wood to look at. It's going to be really interesting, so stay tuned. I think it's going to be real helpful for you. There are two main times to prune. One is in the summertime to control the height and the overall size and vigor of the trees. And then the second time is the winter. And the winter is when you can see all the detail. You can really see clearly the structure and what each of these branches is doing, and it's not all obscured by a bunch of foliage. So some of the more advanced things to think about have to do with what is your particular training style? What are you trying to accomplish? If you're trying to accomplish short, compact trees that are like this, often what is used is what's called an open center or a vase shape pruning, where essentially you've got a canopy where it's all out and open like this, as opposed to that central leader that goes up and has branches coming off along the way. So because we're using an open center, supports those very short canopies like we're going for here. That's a pruning style. So as we're pruning for structure, we're going to be trying to, you're going to have to be a little bit of not a fortune teller, but to kind of look ahead and say, okay, if the branch is going out a certain way, if it continued growing in that direction and was loaded with fruit, what would it be doing? And sometimes imagining, if this thing kept going that way, where would it end up? Is it going to interfere with other trees? Is it going to overly crowd an area? Imagine that thing just thicker and with more branches on it. Is that going to start crowding out other branches? And so you want to let those things inform your decisions. Hey, can you take a second to subscribe? Go, hit the notification bell. I would so appreciate it. Thanks, bye. Okay, so we want to remember, if we're going for form, we want to take out stuff that's growing into the center. Not only am I keeping the center of these two trees free, so anything that's growing in toward the center, like this, for example, would get cut off. That's growing into the center. But also things going into the center of the tree itself. We want it to be light and airy and open. And so this one right here is going right into the center of the structure here. So I'm going to find it. Okay, you see how that opened it up? Just getting rid of that one. So now that's going to allow light and air and create room for the limbs that we want to grow. Great example of a deformed branch is one that is curving like that and is going down like that. What we want is a branch that is going straight and upward. So something like this branch is a normal branch, whereas this one is deformed and it's aiming downward, which is going to mess up fruit production later. As you're doing this backyard orchard culture, something that we want to pay attention to is keeping these trees small and manageable. We want lots of compact growth that has almost more of a bush, a fruit-bearing bush, than a tall tree. And one way we do that is by limiting the growth on some of these more spindly things. And so, for example, here, as you see, this long cherry stem here, this long cherry branch. Now, maybe we want it to start just giving us another branch here, but what would happen if we cut it back here, about 2/3 of the way down, and allowed it to branch out with additional branching right there? That's going to keep the tree much more compact. So as I go around, I'm going to be looking for opportunities to cut those long, spindly ones back by about maybe 1/3 or half, and that'll allow branching and a lot more lateral growth and give us more branches, which means more fruit that's in a smaller space. We like that. This pink lady apple here has a lot of stuff going on. You notice that it's very straight and upright. What I would like to do is I'm going to put I have some sticks down here, that I'm going to use to spread these branches a little bit to create some more of an open canopy. But I notice here that some of the growth here is really competing. Look at this, it's like a little forest. Which of these do you think is going to be competing with the other ones? So one way you can get rid of them competing is by spreading them apart from each other. Another is this one, this kind of water sprout that came up here is going to end up, imagine this thing has a bunch of foliage, this is going to totally be in the way. So this one is gone. The pruning techniques we've been talking about today do not apply entirely to citrus. The 5 Ds, those dead, disease, damaged, dying, or deformed, and did I say 5? I don't remember. But anyway, the 5 don't apply. Those do apply to the citrus, but in terms of an open center pruning, citrus is really more of a shrub. What we're talking about today is more of for these deciduous fruit, the stuff that loses its leaves every single season. I would like to show you a great example of 2 different things. What open style we're looking for compared to what naturally grows and what we're going to have to deal with. And so something that you see here is our pluot. This is a flavor grenade pluot, such yummy fruit. If you can grow one of these, do it. I think it gets pollinated by Santa Rosa plum, which is right here. But you might notice here that this has a lot of growth, a lot of spindly stuff, branches going every which way, and needs a bit of cleaning up. You've got some stuff growing into the center here. And you've got here some things that are crossing, these branches that are crossing here. Now look on the other hand at this. This is called a cotton candy aprium. It's an apricot plum. They're calling them interspecific hybrids. Essentially what it is, it's a cross breeding of the two and really getting a tasty fruit. I just planted this, and when I planted it, I wanted to pay attention to the structure of the tree. So you see here that we've got a very balanced structure. Each of the branches that's going out is about the same amount of growth on it. The center of it, if you can tell, is actually pretty open. So if you were to drop a basketball in there, a basketball could sit right in this, it'd be cradled right in there. And this is the type of pruning style that we want to go for with something like that. Now, that has some fruiting wood on it, that has some other things going on that we want to pay attention, so it's not going to be as severely pruned. That has a lot more growth that's available to it. But what we're going for is balance. And I'm going to show a couple of examples of that. Again, looking at this example of a very young tree, just not a few months in the ground here, open center pruning, pruned down here for this backyard orchard culture, and everything is growing out of that. You see here, this has not been pruned at all. There's lots of growth in the middle, lots of growth going every which way, which is going to be a little crowded when foliage kicks in. And here's one, this pluot that I've done a lot of pruning on already, and you can see that it's pretty open. You see how light can get into the center of the canopy there. It's going to touch the fruit. Lots of airflow. It's not so cluttered. So you see the difference between this one. Oh, and it's pretty balanced too. You'll notice on the tops and on the outside, it's pretty balanced. That's really important to look for. While this tree is balanced, it is not very open in the middle. Everything is still very busy and crowded. And so I'm going to clean this up. When you're walking around, you want to make sure that you're creating a balance with the tree itself, as well as for the multi-planting if that's what you're doing. So remember, when we multi-plant, we're essentially treating each of these trees as a branch coming off of a central trunk. So you want there to be balance around the entire planting. So if you've got one variety that's really vigorous, you want to bring some of that height down and some of that vigor down to allow the smaller ones to catch up or be balanced. Now, something that I'm looking for here is I'm looking to make not just a bunch of little small cuts, if one cut can make the difference. So there's a problem here. There's a crossing branch right here, and so something here has to change. This is already interfering with each other, so either I can cut this branch off, or I can cut this branch off, or I can cut this branch off. Now, what I'm doing here is I notice that this branch that's coming out here is interfering with this one, but we still have a couple of good branches here. So I'm going to make the cut right here. I'm going to cut off, rather than come out and do this little spindly stuff, I'm going to come out with my Felcos. So coming out and making a cut like this might feel really intimidating to you. You should see the ones when I'm planting them from scratch and something is first going in the ground. It comes out and it's about this tall and I come and cut it knee high. It's really, it looks really severe. But this is important. This would have turned into an entry point for bugs and pests and other things for your tree. You don't want that, because then you're going to be dealing with trouble later, and it could mean the end of your tree. You might be replanting the whole thing. So making cuts like this is really important. And you might notice that it freed up that space here. As you're making your pruning decisions, you're gonna wanna pay attention, like I mentioned, to the size of your trees. Now, this in front of me is a Saturn Peach, one of those nice white flesh peaches that is squat and shaped like a donut. Here is a mid-pride peach. It's a regular yellow flesh peach. And this is this Spice Z Nectaplum, which is really yummy as well. Now, you'll notice the Spicy Nectaplum is probably got 2 times the volume of each of these. Really, the one tree itself makes up both of these combined. And so I'm gonna be a little bit more aggressive in pruning this so that it matches the grouping. One thing to consider though too is that because this is on the northern side, I'm not worried about it competing for sun. And so I might allow this, because it's got such tasty fruit on it, I might allow it to stay a little bit larger than I would if it was on the southern facing side. You always want to, when you're doing a multi-planting, you want to take the more vigorous variety, and the one that blooms first, you want to put that at the north side, so that way you're getting all of that southern exposure, so those that bloom later are going to still have southern exposure of the sun and aren't crowded out by something that's already bloomed. So because the Spicy Nectaplum is so much larger, I'm just going to have to run around here and prune pretty heavily, so that way it comes into balance with these others. And actually, as I looked at it, it is probably going to be shading it out if it has height. When we have this eastern sun rise, it's going to be gathering all the sun and stealing it from its neighbors. So I'm going to give it an attitude adjustment. Again, we're going for an open center pruning, and so I see a couple of things that are moving in toward the center of the grouping, and I'm going to start with those first and see if I can free it up. So these 2 trees are a lot shorter, so the Spicy Nectaplum, I'm going to have to bring some of the height down, so that way it matches the height of these 2 other trees. So again, when I'm going to do that, I'm going to be looking for outward facing buds. So let's say that I want to cut this one here, because I want to bring the canopy down. I'm going to make the cut here, or let's say I needed to cut this down for some reason. Here's an outward facing bud. Here's an outward facing bud. So if you cut it here, then it's going to grow that way. We want this to grow out, so I'm going to cut right above it. I would cut right here. Already you see how much of a difference that made in terms of opening up the canopy. I'm going to go through and I'm going to make some height cuts. So I'm going to scoot the camera back and you'll just be able to watch what that looks like as I go around and try to bring the height of this canopy down. How does that look? It looks a lot more balanced. I don't know if you can see that now. As I walk around the tree, there's a lot more balance. There's probably a little bit more to clean up the middle of the tree. A lot of that vigorous growth that's just on the inside. Go in and clean it up. If you got 2 branches that are all close to each other, choose one of them, get rid of one of them. So as I was going through, remember, I was looking for those 5 Ds: dead, dying, diseased, damaged, or deformed. And I was also looking for another D, a 6th D, those that are growing downward. Remember, if there's already going to be fruit on it, it's going to be rubbing into the ground, and we don't want that. So, oh hey, look who just came over here, a couple of hummingbirds. I need to go look up close. Yeah, it looks a lot more balanced. It's a lot more open. The center's open. There's a lot of stuff as I'm walking around it. That's why it's important to walk around, because you're going to spot stuff you didn't like. This, for example, should just be cut out. Some of this stuff, all this tangly junk in here, remember, you're trying to look ahead and say, if this continues growing, if these continue growing, what are they going to be interfering with? As this continues growing, what's it going to interfere with? It's going to be coming down and hitting this branch if this one comes down. So, still a lot of fruiting wood even after my cuts, but you want to go through and walk around and be looking for balance on these trees. Something really helpful too that I didn't know before is how to look for fruiting wood. And what you're looking for is essentially where there are buds on here. If you've got buds that are close up, I'm going to do this so you can see it. If you've got buds that are very close on the stem, those are usually going to be those that flower and then fruit, versus those that are a lot further apart from each other, which is more of just the vegetative. That's just going to be leaves. So if you look on here, I'm going to show you one other thing. Usually those are going to also come in groups of 3. The ones that are going to be budding and turning into flowers are going to be groups of 3, whereas the vegetative ones are usually just a single bud. And so I'm going to do a couple of close-up shots so you can see that too. So we expect that this, because remember they're close together, see how this group is close to that group, this close to that group. This is fruiting wood. This here with all these buds on it is likely fruiting wood. This here, fruiting wood, fruit, 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 fruit. Let me see if I can even find an example of one that's just vegetative. I'm having trouble on this tree. This just gets loaded with fruit. It's hard to even tell. Okay, so on this one, we can tell that the wood is kind of different than some of the others, just even in terms of its color. But you might notice this only has a single bud. See that? A single bud, single bud, single bud. So this is likely going to be just vegetative, while something like this next door to it has 3 buds. That's going to be flowering and fruiting, flowering and fruiting. You see some of the single vegetative buds as well, but yeah, look at that. This is going to be interesting in a couple of months when they start to swell and pop open with flowers. It's going to be beautiful. Oh, one other big reason why you want to keep these limbs cut a little bit shorter and more compact is because imagine that there is some fruit on this thing. That fruit is going to start bowing the thing all the way down, and as these things are pretty thin and undeveloped, it's going to really weigh the branch down. So having a little bit closer, it doesn't get look at him back there in his little car. Having a little bit closer to any of the weight that's out here, it's just leverage. It's going to be a lot heavier on the tree further out that it goes. So you want to try to reduce that and have it as compact and tight. Imagine holding something heavy way out from your body versus holding it close by. So that's what we're going to do for the tree as we cut this back a little bit. Why are these trees all naked and why are all their leaves on the ground? Because in Southern California, these trees don't realize that it's nap time. It's so warm and it's so nice that they never go dormant, and we want to make sure that they go dormant because then when they wake up, we want them to have all the energy they need to make some yummy fruit. Well, on this episode of The Busy Gardener, I hope that this has been helpful. A primer on how to look at high density planting or multi-tree in one hole planting, and how you prune for balance, how you prune for structure, how you look for fruiting wood, and how you set your trees up so that way you get reliable, consistent fruiting year after year. And whether you've got 1 tree or 500 in your orchard, until next time, stay busy.